In this video, I want to talk about how crucial your drumhead choice is for your sound. Every drummer out there wants to find their signature sound, or maybe you also want to sound like a drummer you really like. And what you usually do is you check out the cymbal setup, you buy the same cymbals or signature cymbals, you check out the drum shells, what configuration they play, what sizes, what depth, what snare drum they use, what microphones. But one very crucial part that people often don't think about too much is the choice of the drumheads. And for me that's a pretty obvious thing, because the drumheads are actually what you hit and also what's resonating when you hit them. So let's talk about those and how drumheads affect your sound. Now, first of all, you need to have an idea of what you want to sound like. Do you want to have a very open sound? Do you want to have a very muffled sound? Are you going to play jazz, where you play a lot of low volume playing, or do you play very loud? Do you hit the drums hard or do you hit them soft? So things like durability are definitely a factor when choosing drumheads, because if you're a very hard hitter and you choose single ply drumheads, they won't last that long. But, and I'll show you what I mean by that in just a second throughout the video, if you buy very thick drumheads because you're a heavy hitter and you don't want to destroy the drumheads every time you play or practice, then you'll have the issue of not having that much of tone response openness when you play them in a low volume context. So it's a lot of factors that come into play or into consideration when you want to find your drumheads. And to show you kind of where the two ends of drumheads are, I want to show you one setup where I have this drum kit with the same tuning. We use a tune bot and have all the hertz numbers down. I will also post them in the description for the better heads, so we have them at the exact same tuning. And on the one side we're going to have single ply drumheads, very open tuning, very open sound. And on the other side we're going to have very muffled drumheads. And what drumheads those are going to be, we'll talk about in just a second. The first setup here are single ply drumheads, so we have UV1s on the toms and G1s on kick drum and snare drum. With single ply drumheads you usually get a pretty open sound, and they also respond very well in low volume playing. Let me just demonstrate that on the toms for you. So even when I'm playing very soft, the drum really sings, because it's a thin drum head, single ply, not that much weight on the drum head, and the same applies to the kick drum. Now in this scenario we also got a closed reso head, and with this one you really get, I'd say, the most low end you can get with two single ply drum heads. And it's really like, think about Carlock. Think about a Carlock kick drum sound. You'll get a Carlock kick drum sound only with single ply drum heads and a closed reso head. I'm gonna play the whole kit for you in just a second, but the first thing to talk about is the snare here. Snare, G1 as well, single ply drum head, coated, and that's maybe a single ply drumhead on the snare drum is maybe the way to go. If you're a really hard hitter, consider a pre-dampened drumhead or a double ply drumhead. Once again, if you want to know more about snare drum heads, check out our comparison video. But single ply drumheads, besides being open, reacting good in low volume, they also give you the biggest range of sounds you can get. But before I get into that, let me just play the drum set as it is for you. Now that's a pretty massive drum sound. The toms really sing, they have quite a lot of sustain and tone. The snare is pretty open and the kick drum is just really a massive bass monster. And of course there is music where you want that sound. For example, if you're playing a Led Zeppelin cover band or you want to play classic rock music, this might be a good sound for you. Also, if you want to play a jazz music or more low volume music where you want the drums to sing, of course you might tune the drums up higher, but you want the drums to sing and to react even if you just slightly touch them. And this also works great with single ply drum heads that are just open. Also in this case, and we'll not change that, we have clear single ply heads on the reso side of the toms, so they also sing. And there's no muffling involved at all. Now, to show you what I meant by with single ply heads you have the biggest range of sounds you can get, let's just bring in some muffling. And first up, let's cut a hole in the reso head of the kick drum. Okay, so the porthole in the kick drum has two big benefits. The first is, it's very easy now to put muffling inside the kick drum, and we'll do that in just a second. And the second thing is that you can also put a microphone there. So if you're aiming for a very clear, direct and attacky kick drum sound, you need the porthole to get the microphone in there to capture the attack. Now this still is a pretty open kick drum sound, but the porthole changed quite a bit. Now single ply drum heads, open drum sound, very good. Let's bring in some muffling just to show you the options you have with single ply drum heads. So for this, I'm gonna bring in our trusty mini muffs. For me, 2 on the floor tom is a great way to go. 1 for the rack tom, 1 for the snare, and we're gonna place 1 blanket inside the kick drum. Okay, so as you could hear, you got quite a range that you can cover with just single ply drum heads. Now, if you think, I know I mentioned this video twice now, but the snare drum head comparison we just did with the Evans drum heads, we had like 15 different snare drum heads. So you get from single ply, very thin drum head to thicker single ply, thin double ply, thicker double ply, pre-dampened with a dot, a ring, the small holes. There's such a range of drum heads you could choose. And if you want to go for a more muffled sound, a more attacky sound, more durable drum heads, there's a lot on the spectrum you could choose. And just to give you an idea of how drastically the drum head choice changes your sound, we'll go for pretty muffled drum heads now. So let's get them on. Okay, so here we go, a completely different drum head setup. And if we had the one end of the spectrum in the beginning with open single ply drum heads, we now have pretty muffled drum heads. And that's kind of how far you could go. And in between you have all the different shades of gray. So it's not white or black, blue or red. It's there's all sorts of pink in between. So you can go wherever you want. And if you want to know more about different drum head models, where they are on the spectrum, check out once again the snare drum head comparison video we did, because all the principles that apply to the snare drum also apply on toms and the kick drum. So a pre-dampened head, for example, double ply head, clear versus coated, all topics we covered there, and you can just you can take it and translate it to the whole drum kit. Now here we have hydraulic heads on the toms now, hydraulic black heads, and those are double ply heads with a thin oil film in between. And this really, it kills the overtones. You still got tone, sustain, everything's there, nice attack, very clear attack, but without annoying overtones. Let me just play those. Now the toms sound pretty muffled. I like the sound of those heads. Low, muffled, very clear. But to give you an idea of how different those drum heads sound, here's the 10-inch head of the UV1, the single ply head. And that's the hydraulic. So you really hear the difference of the tone that the drum head itself creates. So that's pretty different, and you'll never get a sound as open as this one out of this drum head. That's just impossible. That's not what the drum head's built for. Let's get rid of those. And continue with the snare drum. The snare drum head here is HD dry, and that's a double ply head with a dampening ring on the outside with those little air vents all around the drum head that help the air to get out of the drum shell to shorten the sound, the sustain. And what you get here is a very cracking, very clear backbeat sound, and if that's what you're looking for, that's a great drum head for you. To give you an idea of what I'm talking about, this is what it sounds like. That's a nice cutting snare sound. But once again, if you compare it to a single ply drum head, with a single ply drum head you could do this rim shot thing next to the rim where it really sings like this. There's not that much left. It's just a pretty muffled tone for if you're playing a groove. Nice, very precise backbeat sound. Kick drum, same thing. Muffled, very muffled kick drum sound. It's the EMAT, and you have those foam inlays here. You can see it on the foot cam. And it comes with two foam inlays. We chose the thicker one to have the biggest possible contrast to the open drum head in the beginning. And right now there's also one blanket inside the kick drum, just to muffle a little more, make it more precise. But this is the EMAT. Reso head is the same tuning as before. Let me get the blanket out and show you what it sounds without the blanket in there. This is a pretty pre-muffled setup. And that's gonna work especially well if you're looking for a sound like this. But if you buy those drum heads because they're a little more expensive and you think they're better drum heads, they're different drum heads. They have a purpose. They have a sound that they're built for. And if you're looking for that sound, this is your choice. If you're not looking for this sound, different drum heads are yours. So once again, we come to the point where you need to have an idea of what you want to sound like and then choose the drum heads accordingly. But before I get to that, to sum up the whole video and get to an end, let me quickly play this kit for you so that you hear it in combination with everything. But let's put the blanket back in the kick drum. Works very well with this drum kit. In the end of the video, we also have a direct comparison of the two setups with the single ply drum heads and the pre-damped ones here. You'll hear the drums with no muffling at all, with only the kick drum muffled and with everything muffled. Also with the pre-damped heads muffled even more, so to the pretty extreme. So if you want to know what they sound in direct comparison, it's in the end of the video. But before you go there, let's just talk about everything we had today. Once again, it's up to your personal taste and your personal sound. And you have a lot to choose from. And there's things like coated versus clear. We haven't talked about that too much today because I've done in so many other videos. But once again, clear drumheads have more attack, coated drumheads are warmer. If you want to play brushes, go with coated heads. If you want a very clear cutting attack, for example, for metal music, go with clear heads. For pop, I'd usually, for a warm tom sound, go with coated heads. On the snare, for me, it's usually always coated because it's a little more warmer sound. You can play brushes on the snare, and I just like it. Kick drum, same thing. Clear heads have more attack. Coated heads are a little warmer. If you want a warmer kick drum sound, coated head. Clear kick drum sound, very clicky, cutting, go with a clear head. If you want to have a wide spectrum of what you can do, go with drumheads that are not pre-dampened. So for example, single ply or double ply drumheads. For me personally, single ply drumheads are great for music where you want an open sound. Double ply drumheads are great if you're going for the extra durability. So for pop rock playing where you're really hitting the drums, I'd always go with double ply drumheads. For softer playing, jazz for example, or quite pop music, also go with single ply heads. And if you don't know what your sound is now, maybe start with open drum heads. Start with single ply, double ply heads, put on some muffling, check out where you think your drums sound good, and then decide, maybe go through our snare drum head comparison video, check out what drum head you think on the spectrum of non-muffled to muffled drum heads might be the spot for you, and then go for those. Check those out. I know no one has the money to just buy all drum heads and check them out, but that's a pretty good way to go for me, because if you go with the hydraulics, you'll never have the chance to find out what other options you would have liked that are not that muffled. For me, I'd always go with a single ply head on the snare, double ply heads on the toms, and a pre-muffled kick drum head. So you can also mix and match. For example, if you like a very fat and very low floor tom, but you like a singing rag tom, you can always go for different drumhead models. And before we get to the direct comparison now, please let us know what other drumhead videos should we do in the future. Do you want us to do a tom comparison because we did one for kick drum, 2 for snare drum? Should we also do one for toms? What is your perfect or your favorite drumhead setup? Just post everything that comes into your mind in the comments. We're always happy to read your comments. I try to read all of them. Sometimes it just gets out of hand, but I try to read them and get back to you as soon as I can. Also, if you want to support our channel, if you want us to sustain the work we're doing, we have a donation link in the description, and it would be great if you could just every small amount helps us to sustain this and to grow, get better at what we do, and just give you the best videos we can. I hope this video helped you find your drumhead setup. Really looking forward to hear what you got out of this video, and I hope to see you in one of the next videos. And now it's time for the comparison.